All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. How are you? Thanks for coming out on this chilly day today. As you know, it takes a village to do these things. So thanks to Jill and Alyssa and the whole team. Thank you to the guild members who will provide the tea and cookies at the end, which I'm sure you're here for, maybe even more so than the talk today. That's okay. But I also want to especially thank somebody, Mari Kuroda, who's sitting in the back, who actually made all of the tea cups and saucers back in the day, and who has forgotten more about ceramics than I will ever know. So I'm a little humble today having Mari in the bathroom. So welcome to Earth, Fire, and Form, Roots and Revolution in Contemporary Japanese Ceramics. A number of times Jill has jokingly referred to this lecture as my Earth, Wind, and Fire talk. And believe me, I'd be happy to talk about the groundbreaking 6 Grammy Award winning $90 million record, 90 million record selling greatest band of all time. However, I'm equally happy to talk today about contemporary Japanese ceramics of the past few decades, a period that is often called the second golden age of ceramics in Japanese history, following the spectacular Momoyama period of the late 16th century. I've long been drawn to contemporary ceramics movements in Japan, and after starting here in 2014, have been able to develop this new area of the Allen's collection beginning in 2015 with our acquisition of the work on the left by Fukami Sueharu that we'll talk about later. The current creative explosion in ceramics arose from a number of causes and conditions that I'll detail in the talk. But in general, in the latter half of the 20th century, we see an expansion of a couple of things. So first, who, right? Who could be a ceramicist? We see a widening of the closed world of traditional ceramics and its closely guarded secrets, extended apprenticeships, and family lineages of ceramicists, and an opening to artists trained in art schools and universities. And while women were always involved in ceramic making in traditional studios to one extent or another, with this opening, we see women recognized as major ceramic artists in their own right, such as Tanaka Yū, whose work is on the right. And along with this broadening of who could be a ceramicist, we also see a dramatic shift in what ceramics could be, where ceramics has evolved from functional craft with things made to be used to avant-garde art with sculptures like these made to be appreciated as expressive works of art. I chose the subheading Roots and Revolution because I think it captures some of the dynamic tensions at play in contemporary Japanese ceramics. We will see this tension again and again, reflected in different ways in the works that we'll look at today. My framing of the idea of roots and revolution is expressed in a Japanese cultural context through the phrase shu ha ri. Shu means to keep, preserve, protect, mastering the traditions of the past. Ha means to break or smash, the realization that one can break basic forms or rules that don't fit the artist or the time. And finally, ri, which means to go beyond those rules, to transcend them. And as an example, let's use this work by the artist Takegoshi Jun, which is currently on view. Takegoshi Jun is from a family of ceramicists working for generations in the Kutani ware tradition, with origins in the 17th century and known for its vivid use of color. On the right are two examples of 19th century Kutani ware from the Allen's collection that are not on view, but are there to give you an example of that. Takegoshi was trained in Kutani ware in the traditional family apprenticeship model, so that's the roots part. But then he went to art school. He studied painting, and he brought a new vision to the Kutani tradition that was further inspired by techniques of textile dyeing. And through these new inspirations, he revolutionized Kutani ware, something we will discuss later in the talk. So that's an example of kind of what we're talking about today. So in detailing this creative tension, my talk today is divided into a few sections, which are not in any way historically comprehensive and maybe idiosyncratic, but is a way of grouping and reflecting on what is currently on view at the Allen. The first two sections are based on historical artistic moments. The first, the Mingei or folk craft movement of the 1920s to the 1940s. Then from vessel to sculpture, which covers artists beginning in the 1970s who moved ceramics from functional vessels to avant-garde sculpture. The next sections, apart from one work, focus on works made in the 21st century and reflect groupings of my own based on broad trends. The first, nature and materiality. Next, color and surface. Next, minimalism and precision. And then finally, playfulness and conceptuality. These groupings allow me to present connections among the works on view that are actually more practical in a PowerPoint presentation, because as you'll see, we'll jump around the museum from this case to that case to this case. But this way we kind of keep things focused on themes and the works, again, works that are on view. And of the works on view, there is a group of works that I'd like to draw special attention to. Last May, we brought out this amazing work by Tanaka Yū in the King Sculpture Court, one of the first things that you see when you walk into the main entrance of the museum, not only because it's dramatic and different from other works on view, but also because it's neon yellow and like really large, right? You can't miss it, that helps. It's titled A Tsutsumimono, or Wrapped Item A, and it was the first work we exhibited from a group of 10 works on loan from the collection of Carol and Jeffrey Horvitz, who are the foremost collectors of contemporary Japanese ceramics in the US today. They have generously lent 10 works to the Allen for a 3-year loan period. The Horvitzes are very active, enthusiastic, generous promoters of contemporary Japanese ceramics, so works from the Horvitz collection can be seen at museums throughout the country, either in traveling exhibitions or as loans or as gifts. So a big thanks to the Horvitz for sharing these works from their amazing collection with the Oberlin community. So let's jump in with the Mingei movement, an influential artistic movement in early 20th century Japan. During the Meiji period of the late 19th century, Japan was rapidly modernized and industrialized in an effort to resist encroaching European and American imperial expansion. Many Western ideas and technologies flooded into Japan at this time. In the arts, this translated into an elevation of Western arts like oil painting and sculpture, and a separation of high art from craft, a distinction that honestly really didn't exist in traditional Japanese arts. By the 1920s, after a few decades of this, the revolutionary response to this was to go in the other direction and to elevate folk arts. The term Mingei combined the words for the people, the common people, and for craft, and was coined by the philosopher Yanagi Soetsu, who was inspired by what he called the idea of the unknown craftsman. That true beauty was unself-conscious and found in ordinary and utilitarian objects, handmade of natural materials. And if that sounds like the ideas of the arts and crafts movement in Britain, or of William Morris, whose quote graces our entrance, they were similarly reacting to the industrialization of society. And there was clearly some cross-pollination happening through translation between Japan and Britain and Europe. Although the British version is a little more anti-capitalist, and the Japanese is a little more inflected with Zen Buddhism and the wabi-sabi aesthetic of the tea ceremony. And all of this sets the stage for Hamada Shoji, a renowned Japanese ceramicist and a key figure in the Mingei movement. Hamada's distinctive style emerged through international exchange, particularly during his 5-year collaboration with the British potter Bernard Leach in both Japan and Britain. He also drew inspiration from Okinawan and Korean Joseon period pottery, adapting rather than imitating these other cultural traditions. This bowl by Hamada is currently on view in the Stern Gallery. He created the bowl using the ronuki, or wax resist technique. He applied melted wax in bold patterns onto bisque-fired pots before glazing, creating striking contrast between glazed and unglazed surfaces, seen here in the round spaces and swooping lines that reveal the stoneware beneath. So those were the spots that were covered with wax. It gives the works a spontaneity and a natural expression that I think embodies the ideals of the Mingei movement. Here's a detail of the light areas where the wax was applied, and the persimmon-colored glaze was applied next, but the wax, of course, kept it from glazing these areas. After the glaze dried, the wax was removed, and Hamada added these floral motifs in the circles with an iron-based glaze. Finally, he covered the whole work with a transparent glaze, which was a technique that was inspired by Korean puncheon wares. Another offshoot of the Mingei movement was the famous tradition of designating artists what are popularly called living national treasures. Has anyone heard the term living national treasure? Yeah, it started in Japan. Do we have those in the US? We need them. We got plenty of people. But more properly, it's the term is a preserver of important intangible cultural properties, which is a little more wordy. This is an award given to people possessing mastery of traditional arts, and they're not just the visual arts, but also crafts and performing arts, kabuki, things like that. Hamada received this distinction in 1955 at the age of 61 and was one of the first ceramicists recognized with this honor. Hamada's legacy rests in his masterful synthesis of diverse global influences with Japanese traditions, and his work had a significant impact on studio pottery worldwide. We're now going to take a bit of a leap from the first half of the 20th century and the Mingei movement to the 1970s for the theme From Vessel to Sculpture, a period in which artists rethought what ceramics could be and moved the field from functional vessels to avant-garde sculpture. This work is currently on view in the Stern Gallery. Kawakami Rikizo studied ceramics in Kyoto as a young man and established his own ceramic studio in 1958. In 1964, he joined the influential avant-garde ceramics movement called Sodeisha, which means crawling through mud, which is, I think, a very evocative idea, a very sort of kind of a humble name for yourselves. The group contrasted themselves with the Mingei movement and explored clay as a medium for sculpture and not functional vessels, which was part of the Mingei ideal. Kawakami's sculpture Path of the Wind, or Kaze no Michi, although from later in his career, 1992, is a great example of this concept that started in the 70s. It uses the everyday familiarity of a stairway to create a timeless and I think multi-layered symbol. The stairs seem to rise through an archway into a ruined structure. The title Path of the Wind evokes the sighs of wind gusts passing through an empty building. But the abstract quality of the work leaves it open, I think, to one's own interpretation. Does it suggest ascension through a difficult threshold, or perhaps the remains after a disaster? Just next to it in the Stern Gallery is another work that uses the motif of a stairway. And I selected these two because I thought the two of them could work together in an interesting way. Miyashita Zenji, our next artist, was from a family of celebrated ceramicists. He studied with his father, Miyashita Zenji, but also studied at Kyoto City University of the Arts. While there, he met artists of the Sodeisha group, who I just mentioned, but he was not formally affiliated with them. He established his own kiln in 1964, and his work includes both sculptures like this one, as well as functional vessels. But in all of his work, Miyashita approached ceramics as a fine art and created pieces that, in his words, were meant for contemplation and visual appreciation. He was designated a living national treasure in 2005. This quiet work of precise geometry and subtle gradations of color is a fine example of his sculpture. In it, a stairway seems to ascend through layers of clouds or mountains. And he created these in a really interesting way, these layers. Working with both stoneware and porcelain, Miyashita is best known for his distinctive colored clay technique, usually called neriage, but Miyashita prefers the term saide, which means layered clay. In it, he added pigment to the clay. So this is not a glaze, this is actually colored pigment in the clay. And then he carefully layered thin sheets of different colored clays to create these striking patterns that often resemble landscapes or other natural phenomena like mountains or clouds or waves. So really beautiful and really subtle in the slight variations in color that create these gradations. Now, shifting to the 21st century, throughout the 21st century, US museums have showcased contemporary Japanese ceramics with an exponential growth. since the 1990s, with at least 8 major exhibitions from 2000 to 2015 and 11 since 2015, but in total over 50 exhibitions, small and large, since 2000, including the acclaimed recent exhibition Radical Clay at the Art Institute of Chicago earlier this year. These are shots that I took at the opening. It was pretty crowded, as you can see. The growth has been due to a number of factors. Certainly the creative explosion and the technical achievements in the field, and the beauty and variety and accessibility of the work to museum visitors, but also practical things like affordability compared to other contemporary art, and the fact that the works are not light sensitive and can be exhibited for long periods, makes them a little more attractive to curators. Finally, the efforts of American dealers, particularly Joan in New York, and collectors like the Horvitzes, Housing Alice North, and others who have been great advocates for this art and have really made it widely known. So our theme for 21st century works our first theme is nature and materiality, works that have organic forms and tactile surfaces. The first is currently on view in the Stern Gallery. How many of you have seen this one in person? Just a few of you. Oh boy, rush immediately after this talk to go see it, because you really can't, the slides don't really do it justice. So born to a ceramicist family, Hayashi Shotaro initially walked away from the family ceramics legacy, and after high school worked in business as a salaryman or office worker. But he couldn't resist the call, and soon he returned to pottery, working alongside his brother Hayashi Kotaro, also a well-known ceramicist. He soon mastered the ceramic traditions of his home province, Gifu. These were traditions known as Mino ware, which included Shino, Oribe, and Seto wares. By the late 1960s, his work earned him recognition and awards. In 2012, Gifu Prefecture designated him a living treasure. So the idea of the national living treasure having now been adopted by various provinces and regions in Japan. I have to say that this work really blew me away when I saw it in person. Again, you can't really get the sense of it in a photograph. The mix of colors is really indescribable, but the artist describes it with his own poetic term for it, Manyosai, the color of 10,000 leaves. The glaze is a variation on the 500-year-old Shino ware glaze tradition, known for its thick glaze made up of feldspar and ash, and very smooth surfaces as the glaze kind of melts on the surface like you see here. The work seems to have emerged from nature. Its surface displays an elegant spiral and a texture like a nautilus shell or some kind of seashell. But you may have noted that it's titled vase with crenellations in a circular wave pattern. Despite its form, it is a functional vessel, a vase made for tea ceremony flower displays. And the world of ikebana, or flower arrangement, is another area of fascinating creative exchange with contemporary ceramics, but a bit outside of today's topic. But I'd love to talk more about it. Amazing things happening in avant-garde flower arranging. The next work in the theme of nature and materiality is right there in the East Gallery. Shingu Sayaka is based in Osaka and was a 2003 graduate of Osaka University of Arts, where she studied ceramics, and then had an apprenticeship at the Shigaraki Ceramic Cultural Park in Shiga, Japan, where she studied the traditions of Shigaraki ceramics, so rooted in the past. But also studied with the influential ceramicist Sugiura Yasuyoshi, who's known for very delicate and complex floral sculptures. Her work is rooted, Shingu Sayaka's work is rooted in floral forms, but often moves into abstractions like this bowl. Shingu built up this work by hand building with small petal-like pieces of clay, then coated the surface with white clay slip. It is only vaguely a bowl and seems to suggest the fragility and impermanence of a flower. Really beautiful piece. Near Shingu's work in the same case is the next work in the theme of nature and materiality, this other amazing tea bowl. Like Hayashi Shotaro seen a moment ago, Horiichiro is from Gifu province, also comes from a family of ceramicists, and was apprenticed as a young man to Kato Kozo, the foremost traditional master of Mino ware. Hori is known for his works in the Shino and Seto ware traditions of Mino ware. He's interesting. He's known as a bit of a recluse. He lives up in the mountains, has his kiln and everything kind of hidden away. And he has constructed his own traditional style climbing and tunnel kilns. He only fires twice a year, building up to these moments with careful, preparation and deep reflection. And so there's a lot of pressure on him during those two firing moments. And you can see him here firing some works. At first glance, this tea bowl by Hori seems deceptively simple, a straight-sided vessel covered in deep, lustrous black seto ware. But look closely. The surface is alive with subtle irregularities, ridges, dimples, and scars that speak to the hand of the maker and the unpredictable alchemy of kiln firing. The seto ware tradition was born in the Momoyama period of the 16th century, but is revived here with Hori's particular vigor. Its jet black glaze, achieved through rapid cooling after high temperature firing, invites contemplation of darkness as perhaps a space for reflection. Notice the asymmetry along the rim, the gentle undulation that breaks the geometry of its walls. This tension between control and spontaneity is central to the aesthetics of the Japanese tea ceremony, where imperfection becomes a form of beauty. Hori channels a lifetime of practice preceded by centuries of development in a work that feels both ancient and immediate. The two artists in the next section are among the greats of contemporary ceramicists in Japan and known for creating works with their own unique approach to color and surface decoration. The first work brings us back to the Stern Gallery and another work that you really have to see in person. In Japanese artistic lineages, the head of the lineage receives their name from the previous head. This is seen in the names of famous printmakers and kabuki actors featured in my exhibitions upstairs, but is also true of certain ceramics lineages. Tokuda Yasukichi III here was the third generation heir to the name, and when he passed away recently in 2009, the name was inherited by his daughter, who is now Tokuda Yasukichi IV, continuing the family legacy, but also the first female ceramicist in the lineage. Tokuda Yasukichi III learned from his father the traditions of kutani ware glazes, known for their vivid colors, and he was designated a living national treasure by the Japanese government in 1997. He created his own very distinctive glaze that he called the five-colored body, seen in this work on view, which again, you have to see in person. This was his revolutionary contribution to kutani ware. The glaze seems to have an inner radiance created by the seamless flow and blending of his luminous glazes. Underneath the glaze is a meticulously drawn, repeated design of floral, geometric, and wave-like patterns. So there's this wonderful kind of tension between kind of geometric patterns and this beautiful kind of like sunburst, I guess, of color in the glaze. It's really wonderful. Near Tokuda's work in the Stern Gallery is the work that we started our talk with today, which is this amazing platter by Takegoshi Jun. As I noted earlier, Takegoshi, like Tokuda Yasukichi III, who we just saw, is a master of colorful kutani ware glazes. A tangle of summer plants reaches across a simple white background and seems to stretch beyond the edges of this square platter. Pink morning glories, Asiatic day flowers, and enchanter's nightshades are meticulously rendered with sharp outlines, learned when he was a student of Nihonga painting in art school. But his colors are equally amazing, with subtle gradations that give things a slightly three-dimensional quality. His coloring process was actually inspired by a textile dyeing method called yuzen, in which you color in the outlines of images. And he does this with glazing, coloring in outlines with enamels and doing multiple firings to set all the different colors involved. So it's a really complex process. Our next theme is minimalism and precision, and it brings us over to another case in Stern a case that highlights works with monochrome or single color glazes. And that is this amazing work by Fukami Sueharu, who may be Japan's best known contemporary ceramicist. He has works in major museums throughout North America. He comes from a ceramics family, but unlike the other artists we have seen, his family made industrial porcelain, including mass-produced blue and white tableware, but also things like sinks and toilets. Different kind of ceramics, right? Objects that were designed for function and not contemplation. This environment gave Fukami an intimate understanding of porcelain's physical properties, right? Its strength, its fragility, and the technical precision required to shape and fire it at scale. Yet for Fukami, porcelain was never just a material for necessity. It was a medium waiting to transcend its industrial confines. When he turned to art, studying at the Kyoto City University of Arts, Fukami carried this technical mastery with him from his family, but inverted its purpose. Where industrial porcelain demanded uniformity and repetition, his sculptures pursue purity and singularity. He has written, porcelain shows any marks left by the potter's hand, and I want to leave the least amount of evidence that my hands ever touched the clay. Instead of the potter's obvious imprint seen in other works that we've seen today, I want to leave the subtle mark of my heart or spirituality. To create his works, he uses industrial high-pressure slip casting, injecting watery clay slip into molds at high pressure. Then, removing the work from the mold, he carefully refines the leather-hard form with sharp tools before glazing and firing. His signature subtle blue-green glaze is an ancient one, derived from the centuries-old Chinese Qingbai glaze, known in Japanese as seihaku. It is very similar to the better-known celadon glaze. If I say celadon, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, that beautiful kind of greenish ceramics. We've got some in the Stern Gallery. Both of them are iron oxide-based glazes, but celadon is fired in a low oxygen or reduction kiln atmosphere. And seihaku that you see here is fired in an oxidizing atmosphere. Lots of oxygen is allowed to get into the kiln. And Fukami also adds trace amounts of titanium dioxide, which keeps the color paler than the darker green that you see itself. It's really, really beautiful. The next works in the theme of minimalism and precision bring us back to the East Gallery in this case. Kamada Koji is renowned for revitalizing Temmoku, a glazed tradition that also originated in China in tea bowls of the Song dynasty. His early training at Kyoto City University of Arts grounded him in classical Chinese ceramics techniques. Historically prized for its deep lustrous browns and blacks, Temmoku became Kamada's canvas for innovation. In his career, tradition is not abandoned, but interrogated. He honors the past while asserting a contemporary voice, proving that even the most venerable ceramic language can speak anew in the hands of a visionary. And I have his two works on view with a much, much older Chinese Song dynasty ceramic to give you an idea of where he's coming from. In this work here, called Sparkling Whale Spot Sake Cup, can you imagine drinking sake out of this little beautiful cup? I can imagine it, but certainly can't afford it. Here he pushes beyond the classic tea bowl with his signature oil spot or yuteki effects created by controlled cooling and iron-rich glazes. The glaze shimmers like constellations against a dark background. These metallic flecks, once accidental, are now carefully orchestrated by the artist, transforming a centuries-old technique into a contemporary language of abstraction. Kamada's work embodies roots and revolution, honoring the depth and mystery of Temmoku while elevating it with new colors and dramatic effects like this amazing blue piece right next to it. So our final theme is playfulness and conceptuality, and a fun topic, I think, to conclude the talk with today. Back to the Stern Gallery, and finally to Matsuda Yuriko's amazing foot sculpture. Matsuda is celebrated for her witty, provocative ceramics that challenge conventions of beauty and function. This is arguably a vase for flowers. Her series of foot-shaped sculptures, adorned in the lavish imari-ware style, with its vivid cobalt blues and iron reds and gilded flourishes, turn a symbol of utility, the imari-ware, into an object of opulent display. And in the case in Stern, I've got Matsuda's foot in conversation with earlier examples of Japanese imari-ware, particularly the gold and red Kinranda version that she quotes from. By applying a decorative tradition historically reserved for elegant tableware to a bodily form, Matsuda creates a striking tension between refinement and absurdity. These works embody her larger project to question gendered expectations and the boundaries of craft, transforming porcelain into a stage for humor, critique, and even sensuality. Another playful work brings us back to the East Gallery, and in this case again, Ishiyama Tetsuya studied at the prestigious Tokyo University of the Arts. His education there gave him a strong grounding in traditional Japanese ceramic aesthetics, while at the same time encouraging experimentation with sculptural and architectural forms, something that defines his mature work, like this amazing bowl. This tea bowl, in my opinion, is a miniature manifesto, both embracing and challenging long-held Japanese artistic ideals. The organic austerity of the wabi-sabi aesthetic, popularized by the 16th century tea master Sendo Rikyu, elevated a rough, natural simplicity in the utensils and the settings made for the practice of the tea ceremony, qualities exemplified by other Japanese tea bowls on view in this case. But here, Ishiyama maintains the functionality of a tea bowl and the sense of spontaneity, so, unmediated spontaneity seen in wabi-sabi teaware with these crazy, finger marks and everything, and the rough organic quality of it, while introducing a playful tension with tradition in his careful application of metallic silver and gold glazes. Ishiyama's control of his medium is unmistakable. Although the exterior is silver, the seemingly random indentations, which the artist lightheartedly calls dimples, are meticulously covered with gold. Furthermore, the golden interior of the bowl echoes the dimples and reveals a subtle crackle in the glaze. The avant-garde Japanese artist Okamoto Taro once said, "Art is an explosion." And in this work, Ishiyama introduces his own creative explosion to the customarily serene world of Japanese tea. Our final artist brings us back to the beginning of the talk, Tanaka Yū's amazing wrapped item A. Born in 1989 in Ehime Prefecture, Tanaka Yū represents the third generation of Japanese female ceramics artists who emerged with the post-war liberalization of women's roles in the arts. She began her distinctive wrapped object or bundles Tsutsumimono series in 2019. Tanaka's work draws from a deep cultural history, as cloth wrapping, known as furoshiki, has been used in Japan for over 1,200 years. By recreating this tradition in ceramic form, Tanaka continues the avant-garde tradition of pushing ceramic boundaries from functional vessels to sculpture while connecting to Japan's rich cultural heritage. Her work also demonstrates how traditional artistic concerns about representation and perception continue to evolve in new mediums and cultural contexts. For example, Tanaka Yū's ceramic illusions function as a kind of three-dimensional still life sculpture, paralleling the techniques of 19th century American tromboy still life painters like Dubreuil, Harnett, and Chase that are exhibited near her work. And here's an example of a work that's on view in the King Sculpture Court. Just as these artists meticulously rendered paper currency or pipe or copper vessels to create convincing optical illusions on canvas, Tanaka transforms rigid stoneware into seemingly soft Japanese wrapping cloth. Somebody told me they heard someone in the gallery looking at that was like, "What is that made out of?" Right? And they had to go up close to get the idea that it was actually stoneware. So both traditions of still life painting and the ceramic work require exceptional technical precision. Tanaka through coil building and surface smoothing and multiple glaze applications, the painters through layered brushwork and precise highlighting. The philosophical tension, however, is identical. Viewers simultaneously perceive the illusion, is it currency, is it fabric, and the reality, it's ceramic or paint, creating a cognitive dissonance that challenges our perception. Interestingly, Tanaka has said she never looks at actual draped cloth while she's making her sculptures, but creates a kind of hybrid of the idea of wrapped cloth with the realities of the clay medium. All right, so in conclusion, we covered a lot today, looking at works of contemporary Japanese ceramics currently on view and thinking about artists in Japan who are balancing reverence for tradition with bold experimentation. I'm certainly no expert in this field, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have at this point. And thank you very much for coming today.